We are Kentucky, Tennessee, living here at the West Tennessee Delta Heritage Center. Today, we are visiting the home of legendary blues pioneer Sleepy John Estes. Sleepy John Adams Estes lived from 1899 through 1977. Come with us as we walk through his humble home. As with all of our museum videos, the script that we use is the plaques that the museum has on the walls and other places. We do not add nor do we take away from the wording of these plaques. All of these videos are made for education and entertainment purposes only. West Tennessee Bluesman. Sleepy John Estes was at the center of a rich West Tennessee blues tradition and was the first blues artist from Brownsville to achieve success as a recording artist. He is directly responsible for launching and recording careers of fellow Brownsville bluesmen James "Yank" Rochelle, guitar and mandolin 1910 through 1997, Charlie Pickett, guitar 1911 through 1978, and Lee Tennessee Crisp, harmonica 1912 through 1993, as well as pianist Lee Brown, dates unknown, from Ripley, all of whom made their first recordings on sessions that were shared with Estes. He also extended the recording careers of Brownsville artist Solo Bonds, guitar 1910 through 1947, and Hammy Nixon, harmonica, jug, kazoo 1908 through 1984. By including them in some of his sessions. Over the course of his career, Estes interacted with many other West Tennessee blues artists, including guitarist Hambone Willie Newbern, 1901 through 1965 from Ripley, harmonica player Noah Lewis, 1891 through 1961 from Henning, and harmonica player John Lee Sonny Boy Williamson, 1914 through 1948 from Jackson. Several of these artists recorded versions of Estes songs, and many were influenced by his vocal style and his penchant for composing topical songs about local personalities and events. Yank, Rochelle, and Hammy Nixon maintained musical and recording partnerships with Estes that lasted about 50 years, something almost unique in the folks blues tradition. Estes himself concentrated on singing and never became more than a rudimentary guitar player, almost always having one or more accompaniments to play lead lines on harmonica, second guitar, mandolin, or other instruments. Hammy Nixon became a close companion, helper, and musical partner for the rest of John's life, variously playing harmonica, kazoo, and jug as needed. America Loses Blues Pioneer. John Adam Estes, 1899-1977. With his death, America lost one of its greatest blues singers and songwriters, and Brownsville lost a citizen who made the town known worldwide. He was posthumously inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame in 1991. Sleepy John Estes is buried in the Elam Baptist Cemetery in Durhamville, northwest of Brownsville, in Lauderdale County, Tennessee. His tombstone was erected by the Brownsville Blues Festival Committee in the 1990s. Handmade cigar box guitar, courtesy of bluesman Michael Avery, Alamo, Tennessee. Cigar box guitars. In an 1876 etching of two Civil War soldiers at a campsite, one soldier can be seen playing a cigar box fiddle, with the brand name Figaro clearly shown on the side of the fiddle. This is the earliest illustrated proof of the use of the cigar box instrument. 1876 illustration by artist Edwin Forbes. In 1884, Daniel Carter Beard, co-founder of the Boy Scouts of America, published step-by-step instructions for the making of a 5-string, fretless cigar box banjo. Because cigar box guitars and fiddles were often inexpensive to make, they were essential to the rise of jug bands and the blues. Many of these early musicians were poor African Americans who could not afford the more expensive name brand instruments. The cigar box that is seen here would have been similar to the one made by Sleepy John when he was 12 years old. The Authentic Country Bluesman. The Musical Legacy of Sleepy John Estes. Humble Beginning. John Adam, or Adams, Estes was born on January 25th, probably in 1899, near Ripley in Lauderdale County, Tennessee, and was raised as one of 10 children of Daniel and Millie Thornton Estes in a poor rural sharecropping environment in neighboring Haywood County. The county seat of Brownsville and the Winfield Lane neighborhood to the northwest of the town became his main home for the remainder of his life, although he lived for periods of time in and around Memphis and in Chicago. John Estes was attracted to the guitar as a boy around the age of 12 and made his first instrument from a cigar box, soon advancing to the real guitar that his mother bought him as a reward for picking cotton. At this time, blues was becoming a recognized genre in the African American folk and popular music, and it would become the predominant type of music in John's repertoire. He followed and learned from local musicians such as Hambone Willie Newbern, who would later record the influential blues standard Roll and Tumble Blues, a song whose melody Estes would also use on his first recording. By the time of World War I, John was playing music at the local house parties and community picnics in the country and on street corners in town. In 1919, he met harmonica player Hammy Nixon, who was only 11 years old at the time, and within a few years he met local guitar and mandolin player James Yank Rochelle, who was also quite young. Together or separately, they became Estes's main musical partners for the remainder of his career, although he teamed with many other musicians over the years. For a time in the 1920s, Estes on guitar and Rochelle on the mandolin played with 3 other musicians on violin, trombone, and bass horn in the band in Brownsville. The Man Who Cried the Blues. Sleepy John Estes, 1962. Photo credit Jerry DeMuth. Going against his parents' advice, John avoided farm work as much as possible, trying instead to make his living from music. He followed this pattern for the rest of his life, having occasional lucrative paydays from a performance, tour, or recording session, but usually soon falling back to a state of poverty. During the 1920s, he developed a regional reputation in West Tennessee, and he and his partners would make frequent trips to Jackson, Ripley, Memphis, and other nearby towns to play music. Often he would hitch rides or hobo on trains, and sometimes he would reside in other locations for a period of time. During one such sojourn in Memphis, he had the opportunity to make his first recordings for producer Ralph Peer of the Victor Record Company in September and October of 1929. On most of the songs he was accompanied by Yank Rochelle on mandolin and Jab Jones on the piano. The three men also performed on the streets of Memphis as the Three J's Jug Band, John, James, and Jab, with Jones switching from piano to jug. It was probably Jones who introduced Estes and Rochelle to Victor, as he was also the jug player with the Memphis Jug Band, which he had been recording for the label since 1927. The three musicians made further recordings for Victor in Memphis in May 1930. For the next 5 years during the depth of the Great Depression, Estes returned to farming around Brownsville and played music locally, with the occasional trips and residencies in Memphis and Chicago. In 1934, Hammy Nixon recorded with guitarist and singer Brownsville's son, Bonds, for the Decca label in Chicago. After the two of them had a falling out about money, Nixon arranged for a Decca session the following year with Sleepy John Estes. Their records proved to be good sellers, and Estes returned to the Decca studio to record 3 more times. Sometimes he would pocket the advance travel money sent by the company and catch a freight train in Ripley and hobo his way to Chicago. Musical obscurity. In 1937, he and Nixon traveled with the blues guitarist Charlie Pickett from Henning, who was John's cousin, and pianist Lee Brown from Ripley. In 1938, John went to Chicago with son Bonds, and in 1940, apparently, he went alone and picked up accompaniments there. He switched to RCA Victor's subsidiary, Bluebird label, in 1941, recording in Chicago with son Bonds and one-string bass player Raymond Thomas. On some of their records, they were labeled as the Delta Boys. During his years of recording success, John and Hammy Nixon traveled widely, sometimes in Hammy's car, and sometimes hoboing, hustling jobs at house parties, on minstrel and medicine shows, on street corners, and in hobo camps. But for the next 21 years, Estes lived and played music in obscurity. His successful recording career was interrupted by World War II and a long musicians' union strike that halted all commercial recording activity. By the end of the war, blues styles had begun to change to a more urbanized sound, and Sleepy John Estes's country blues seemed old-fashioned to younger listeners. A further blow was the loss of sight in his one good eye. Sometime in the mid-1940s he became stone blind, as he described in a song he composed about his condition. Then his old partner, son Bonds, was killed in Dyersburg in 1947. John did record with Hammy Nixon for the small independent Oral Nail label in Chicago in 1948, but the tracks remained unissued until many years later. Also, in this year, he married his wife, Ola, and began a family in Brownsville. In 1952, he was living on the outskirts of Memphis, where he was recorded with Brownsville harmonica player Lee Crisp for Sun Records. But these tracks also remained unissued for many years. Hammy Nixon had moved to Gary, Indiana, and brought John north as late as 1960 to record a session for another small independent label, B and Baby, but with the same unfortunate results. John returned to Brownsville to try and support his family on a small disability pension, and it seemed that his musical career was virtually over. International Blues Oracle. Sleepy John's career took a sudden turn for the better in 1962, when he was discovered in Brownsville by David Blumenthal, who was making a documentary film about rural poverty. John's old records had attracted the attention of some collectors and were prized examples of authentic country blues. This type of music, in turn, was increasingly being appreciated in the growing American folk music movement. A handful of John's early sides had been reissued on albums aiming at this new, young, and mostly northern urban audience. Blumenthal knew enough about the blues and the folk music to recognize John's importance and recommended him to Bob Koshner of Denmark Records in Chicago, a blues label appealing to this audience. John was brought north and soon joined by his old partner, Hammy Nixon, who had settled back in Brownsville. John would record 7 albums for Delmark and several more for other labels, most of them with Hammy. On some recordings they were joined by another old partner, Yank Rochelle, on the mandolin. The 3 musicians recording in a jug band format. In addition to remakes of his earlier songs, Estes recorded many new compositions along with versions of other blues artists' songs. Sleepy John made many tours for his new fans, beginning with a series of concerts at colleges and folk music clubs in 1962. Hammy Nixon almost always accompanied him. John toured in Canada in 1964 and began playing at important festivals such as the Newport Folk Festival. In that year, he made his first appearances in Europe as part of the American Folk Blues Festival Tour. He returned to Europe 2 years later on that same tour, and for the next several years he had a steady round of major folk and blues festivals. In 1974, he made tours in both Europe and Japan, and he returned to Japan in 1976, where he had become a star and something of a venerated blues oracle. His success came to a sudden end on June 5, 1977, when he suffered a stroke and passed away on the eve of another scheduled European tour. John lost the sight in his right eye in a childhood accident which might have given rise to his nickname, Sleepy, although it has always been reported that he could sing and play music while dozing. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the West Tennessee Delta Heritage Center. This is part 1 of 2 of the Sleepy John Adam Estes Home Museum. We would like to thank the host and the staff at the center for their helpfulness and warm hospitality. We highly recommend that if you are on Interstate 40 between Memphis and Nashville, be sure to stop by and see all of the center. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we bring to you the history of the Appalachian Mountains.